Hey, everybody. Welcome to Roger and Me, aka Roger Ebert and Me, a weekly movie review podcast that acts as a tribute to Siskel and Ebert, hosted by myself, Brett Arnold, and film critic Mark Dusek of MarkReviewsMovies.com. What do we do here? We aim to cover every new theatrical release and every new streaming release every Friday, aka the movie release date that we all know and love, Friday. I'm glad that it hasn't changed in my lifetime. I feel like the date that CDs and DVDs come out, it used to be Tuesday. It was a big deal that it was Tuesday. And now I feel like some stuff still comes out on Tuesday. A lot of it comes out on Friday. It doesn't make any sense anymore. But new release movies, pretty much for the most part, largely come out on Friday. And that's when this podcast comes out. And we're hoping to stay current and keep everybody informed about the new release movies and if they are good or not. We are offering our valued opinions on the subject in the format pioneered by Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. You can think of us as an unofficial continuation of At the Movies, the only guide you'll ever need. End of my little script part that I try to vary up every week. What's up, Mark?
Not much.
Mark is actually being
Bring that
humble. A lot is up for Mark. He is cramming 3 weeks of movies into 2 or something like that. He's doing
Something like that. It's fun.
Yeah, it's a particularly weird time where like a lot of movies you haven't heard of are sneaking out every week. Like Mark has 3, 6, 9, 11 movies on his website this week. We're covering 6, so I only got about half to about half of them. And again, if you go to the website, you will see why I didn't make time for a lot of these movies. A lot of them don't sound very good. God bless Mark for putting in the work, so I don't have to. And my goal is to help push that further for other people, so we do the work, so you don't have to sift through all the stuff at your local multiplex. We're gonna do it for you. Longlegs, one of the most anticipated horror movies of the year, with a very splashy and I'm gonna say loud marketing campaign, just in terms of like it being everywhere I look. Maybe that's like a my online circle bubble thing that I'm seeing it, but it seems to be breaking through in a way that I don't even know if anybody expected it to. I think it's going to overperform big time this weekend. It had a big opening night last night, Thursday night. But we're not a box office podcast. We're a movie review podcast. So I would love to talk about all that stuff. And I will on the New Flesh podcast this Monday. But for now, I'm just going to say, please rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It makes my day when you do. And we're at 48 on Apple Podcasts. We're so close to 50. Let's get to 50. And let's start talking about the 6 movies out this week, starting with Longlegs, starring Nicolas Cage, Micah Monroe, written and directed by Osgood Perkins, the son of horror icon Anthony Perkins, who you probably know as Norman Bates. There's a lot of horror iconography baked into this. Here is the trailer for Longlegs.
Is it scary being a lady FBI agent?
Yeah.
Take a nice long look. A letter was left with the bodies. Signed with one word.
There's so much to discuss. I wonder how long this will take. Mark, tell me all about Longlegs.
So Longlegs is it's a serial killer thriller set in the 90s, and it feels like something that might have come out in the 90s, and it also feels like something that comes from another world almost. There's some weird subliminal stuff going on here that Perkins throws in even during the opening credits, where there are like flashes of these images from crime scenes and other things that you can't make out. It's just real quick, like, oh, this is going wrong. There's something wrong here. And that sense that something is wrong is from the very beginning, where you
Yeah.
have this prologue of a car pulling up to a house in the middle of nowhere, a little girl noticing the car parked outside her house, going downstairs, figuring out what's going on, trying to find, who's in the car, what's going on. And yeah, that's the first moment where I was thinking this is different. There's something weird going on here that I can't quite put my finger on, but it just made me feel uncomfortable from the very, very beginning.
The use of color, like the burst of red that occurs up top, and then it kind of like that it goes from red to black, I believe, and like just the way your eyes are adjusting, it puts you off kilter. You're like, what am I looking at? Like your eyes haven't adjusted to the screen, so it's just putting you in this place right away where you're like feeling uncomfortable. And I just want to jump in before you continue and say you're totally
Yeah.
right. It's a 90s serial killer thriller, very much in the vein of like we had so many copycat post Silence of the Lambs winning Best Picture, post Seven being a huge hit. Like those two movies have inspired an entire subgenre of serial killer thrillers, of which this is absolutely one of. Like it, as you said, it feels like it could have just been one that came out in the late 90s that was after those two movies. But I'm going to call out my buddy Jesse Hassinger here, whose little blurb about it is, it's sort of like watching one of those 90s serial killer thrillers, but if it was accidentally taped onto the VHS tape from The Ring, which I thought was really funny. And then
It
Katie
does
Rife,
feel that way.
it does. Katie Rife, another great critic from Chicago, said a great thing, almost the exact same thing. It's just so funny that two people had this exact same thought, but said it differently in a way that I wanted to read both. Feels like a movie you've seen before, but broadcast on an evil wavelength. She says that the movie, plays with subliminal imagery and hypnotic repetition, and that's all we're talking about, just making the audience uneasy. This movie does that for sure.
There's so much going on just in terms of the form of it. So you have that opening and some of the other, like the scenes of the crimes themselves are shot in boxy, almost 16 millimeter looking thing. It has the best correlation I can think of is it looks like a snuff film at times, just
Yeah.
from the framing of it and the way that it looks. And so you are watching this thing that it feels like you should not be watching. And there are times of like, do I really want to be watching this right now? Because it just does that. I don't know how Perkins is really good at setting up mood and atmosphere. He did. I've been talking about him with somebody recently just because. He did Black Coat's Daughter, which is set like in a Catholic school in the winter
movie.
during break. Really, really creepy stuff. He did
Emma Roberts and Kiernan Shipka in that, I believe. Great. It's a great two-hander.
He did Gretel and Hansel, which is sadly overlooked. It got a really bad release. Just in general, it didn't screen for critics. But it was good. It looked really good.
And like even the people that don't like his stuff always concede that the atmosphere is great. Like he's really great at creating horror atmosphere.
Yeah, and when you're talking about a horror movie, that's a very key part of it, and he does it in a very unique way for horror. And so even when you have this story, which is just Micah Monroe's FBI agent getting called in by her boss, played by Blair Underwood, to look into this killer who somehow has murdered 10 families over the course of like 2 decades, I believe, is what the timeline is. And yet there's no physical evidence of this guy being in the houses when the murders happen. There's no eyewitness testimony of the guy being around the area when murders happen. And so they're trying to figure out, how does that happen? How does that work? How does that function? How does a man who sends these cryptographic messages to the families, days or weeks before the murders happen, how does he end up killing these people in murder-suicide pacts, it seems like, that are going on? Nobody can figure it out. Monroe's character is somewhat half psychic.
We were talking about this off mic because I was like, this movie feels so heavily inspired by like what I would call the Hannibal TV show character of Will Graham, the guy hired to investigate Hannibal and who's the main character of the books. And I was asking Mark, is the character in the book psychic as well, or has that innate ability? They don't quite call it psychic, but like he goes to a scene, and in the TV show, it's basically he can see the whole thing happen before his eyes. And this character is absolutely of that like supernatural. She's got a psychic. It's like a classic thing of like I feel like it's a trope in detective stuff that like you follow your hunches or whatever. But this is like that hunch. It's like a taken further. It's like the hunch is like a psychic situation. But the movie doesn't harp on it very much beyond the beginning.
Yeah, it doesn't harp on any kind of supernatural, preternatural sort of thing until later. But I don't want to talk about that part. This is where so it's a very basic story, and I think that works really well in its favor because it does just let Perkins set up the atmosphere and to do this sort of subliminal things. There were moments like when they go to the farmhouse to look at that first crime scene,
Yeah.
many, many years later, and it looks like somebody has been there making marks on everything and what's going on there. There was a shot I remember of her looking out towards the distance and on the horizon in the twilight. I couldn't tell you if there is a figure walking
Yeah.
past the
Yes.
horizon at that point.
Right.
I couldn't tell you, but in my head, I saw somebody there, and I don't
And
know if that's true.
yeah.
But that's the strength of this movie is to
Yep.
make you question what you are seeing in the moment while you're watching it happen. I
Yeah.
would be very curious to rewatch this
Yeah.
in broad daylight. Um, try to see if I can point out like, oh, were those fake outs or did they actually happen? Because there are scenes like when her house, the log cabin in the middle of nowhere. Why does everyone live in the middle of nowhere? in these movies? It's fine. It's what you
Yeah.
need. Where she goes outside after she thinks somebody is in the woods and somebody might be in her house, and behind her, somebody crosses by the window, and you see that for sure. That's lit really well so that you see it. That's
Yeah.
part of the scare. Perkins is like training us to look in the frame to find stuff that could be there, and I really don't know if stuff is there or not. But and that's how creepy it is. That's what I'm getting at, is that it just makes
Yeah.
you feel unnerved right from the beginning. The sudden cuts when Longlegs appears. Longlegs is played by Nicolas Cage, under a lot of prosthetics, to look a certain way, a very creepy way. Um, I I guess I can say I don't like Cage's performance in this. I know a lot of people do, but I don't. I think it's too
And
much.
you're a big Cage fan.
I am.
Yeah.
Yes, I am. I think it's too much for the material. The
I
character doesn't show up too much,
yeah.
but when Cage is performing the role, it is too much.
It's I I have to agree with you on the Cage point. Like I love Cage and I'm so excited to see him in this role in a horror movie, but it does feel like two different tones are happening in this movie. Like it's like the really intense scary serial killer off kilter subliminal craziness that's going on that we're talking about, and then it'll cut to Cage doing like kind of what you may expect from like a wacky Cage performance and a wacky character, and it just feels lifted from something else, and it just feels like it just didn't. I agree, it didn't work for me in the way that I think it's intended to. And but like there are other bursts, like I don't know if it's going for humor necessarily with that stuff, but like there are bursts of humor that do work, like just like the setting, like it's really like character stuff, like setting the no nonsenseness of Micah Monroe's character by having her hang out with her boss's kid, and the kid's like showing her room, and she's sitting there all prim and proper in her suit, just like taking in the room, and there's like a huge laugh line that's just a kid inviting her to a birthday party, and her going like fastidiously like, I'll be there. And like the audience I saw it with was cracking up. And like that's not like that's impressive character work, I think. So there's a lot going on that I liked, and I do want to keep this mostly positive. But this is one of those cases where it's really annoying to talk about the marketing campaign or something being overhyped. But this is one of those cases where I think the hyperbolic oversells here are going to lead to some people being disappointed by it. And I'm kind of one of them, even though I ultimately liked it. But it's just that this movie is playing in a sandbox that's already been used plenty. And I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting something that was like earth-shatteringly scary, because not only does the marketing campaign, like it was really good at being elusive and just making you want to see it based on this really creepy looking imagery and whatnot. They also very selectively, because I can tell you this because I'm a critic who was invited to see it later when I was invited to see it, but like they had a very specific rollout of who got to see it first and whose raves got to be put in the tweets and in the ads. So like it's very calculated every tweet they highlighted was like, it's the best horror movie ever. It's the Silence of the Lambs level good. Like every post that they would promote about it, which of course they're going to do if you have it, was just heralding how it's going to be like the horror movie of the moment. And like that's how you have to market stuff. I'm not begrudging anybody. I'm so glad Neon is going to have an incredible weekend and this movie's going to overperform. It's so good for the genre. It's so good for the box office. I still like the movie. Like I'm happy, but it did underwhelm me. And I think if I had seen it in a vacuum, aside from all of the marketing and stuff, I don't think I would have been underwhelmed. I think I would have liked it for what it was without being like, well, that didn't live up to this insane expectation that it's just built up by the marketing. So that's its own thing. But marketing aside, I think we can both agree it kind of peters out in the third act reveal. It's one of those things where, as we're saying, it's so mysterious. The movie's like has such a nightmare quality to it that the fact that it does feel like it has to give you a grounded explanation of what's actually happening in this movie that evokes Satanism and stuff, I just didn't think I needed it at all. And the movie spends like it's like a big exposition dump. It's a long scene that explains to make sure you know every detail of how it worked. And at that point, I was just like, frankly, because the explanation is kind of dumb, and I would say it doesn't really hold up to scrutiny. Like I just didn't care for the explanation. Like I was so down for the ride and in for the mystery that I don't know how they could have ended it where I wouldn't have been disappointed by them revealing it. I think the only way is to like not reveal it in such an elaborate schematic way. But if the bar for this movie, or if like the criteria I'm judging it against is like the subgenre of post Silence of the Lambs or Seven knockoffs throughout the 90s and early 2000s, this is like an upper echelon one. This is a good one. I just don't think it's the singular experience it's being sold as, even though I agree with you on the style of it being like so effective at putting you off kilter. But I've always loved Oz Perkins. That's why this is my most anticipated movie of the year. I've always thought he was so good at doing this stuff. So that doesn't surprise me that this movie looks amazing and has great, all that crazy cutting and editing and all that stuff. And it's beautifully shot. The symmetry, like a shot of a house in this movie looks beautiful to me, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, I mean, just the wood paneling inside all of the FBI offices and that log cabin, it all does look really, really good. And you're right, I also like Perkins's past work, and so I was anticipating this, but I think this is formally on a next level for him.
Interesting. Okay.
I do think that. I think that there is a more cohesive idea here. I think he's doing different things with the editing and with the just with the look of it. There is something different with that subliminal imagery that may or may not be there, but I definitely sensed that I didn't have with Blackcoat's daughter or with Gretel and Hansel. I didn't have that sense of it. I do think the atmosphere is great in both of those films, but I do think this is on a next level. And I do wish the plotting, including and especially the third act, were a bit cleaner because it is so precise in just kind of getting through the motions of the investigative stuff that it works on that level. And so when that third act does come in and explains everything to you, you're right, it is deflating.
Yeah.
And that's too bad, because if it had been a little bit stronger, I might have been a little bit more positive on this one, because I really wanted to be all the way through.
Yeah.
But the Cage performance doesn't work in it. It's just over the top, trying to be creepy instead of just being that character is creepy, especially the way that Perkins shoots him with the face obscured most of the time.
Yeah.
Either by the camera, by the framing, because the first shot we have of Longlegs is from a little girl's perspective, and so it's just the chin that you see in that boxy frame. And when he comes down into frame, that's the moment. Scary.
Yeah.
That's scary. And you don't even see what he looks like. It's so quick that you don't see it. So I think just the aura around that character is scary enough that you don't need Cage going over the top, but he does. And then the third act, flashback explanation of everything that's going on with the elements that are actually in play here. I don't think that works when it sets up this mood of mystery throughout it, that just telling you flat out this is what's going on, it doesn't fit with the rest of it. If those parts had been a little bit stronger, I might have been more positive on this, but I'm pretty positive. I'm pretty damn positive on this thing. It's really, really good.
Yeah, it's really strong. I'm also a 3. We're both 3 stars on this, to be clear, just to get out of the way before I say the
Yes,
same
yeah.
thing you said, where it's like I was so close to, like, I wanted to be 3.5 on this, and like if it stuck the landing, if it it feels like it really drops the she has psychic abilities and is able to, it helps her type of thing. Like it feels like something was lost somewhere in this edit that I just don't know. Like there's certain parts of it that feel like untidy, I guess, or something. But I think the first half of it, I was like, this is amazing. And then the second half, it just becomes a little more perfunctory of like, well, this is how these movies are, and this is what has to happen. And there you go. Even if the explanation is like probably something you haven't seen before, it just, the way it comes out, it just feels like, yeah, this is just like, okay, that's how it is. It just feels like once you evoke Satanism, you can kind of get away with anything, right? So it just kind of gives you an explanation, and you're like, okay, like I guess that's fine for how it's supposed to be, but it is kind of deflating is a good way to put it. But I still, I'm still positive. Like I toyed with the idea initially of like 2.5, maybe. I'm like, because I'm disappointed, but like I was never really there. Like I always liked it, but with reservations. And through talking it out, I'm glad we ended up like mostly being positive about it, because there's so much to talk about that's positive. Nicolas Cage looking like Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw, The Next Generation, the one with Matt McConaughey and Renee Zellweger. If you've seen that movie, you know he has a weird look. That's what Nick Cage looks like to me in this. And yeah, I wish the Cage performance worked for me more, but like I love that Cage is in the movie, and I think it's there's like 2 parts of me. I'm like, who cares? He's in the movie. People are gonna like it. That it's wacky Cage. But yeah, it does feel like, and you read interviews with Perkins, and he's just like, you have Nick Cage on your set. You don't tell him what to do. He does what he does, and you try to like, work around it and make it work for you. How make it fit. But like
that's a very diplomatic way of saying that. It almost sounds like he thought it was a little over the top too, and
yeah,
that's why he does cut around him in such a way. But I
yeah,
don't think
I mean,
he meant that. I'm just saying.
Yeah, it was in the context of saying how great it was, and of course, like it was like amazing experience. But like Cage comes in, like you don't tell Cage how to do it. Cage comes with his interpretation, and you mold it. Like you don't tell him, well, no, you don't do that voice. What are you talking about? Don't do that. Like you just do it. And that's the beauty of a Cage performance is that's how he works. And I don't know if I would go as far as to say I didn't like the performance. I just think it's in a different movie than the rest of it.
It's a register above everything else in the movie. Especially with the Monroe performance. She's so good here. She is so good here.
She's already a Scream Queen icon just because of the It Follows being such a huge thing, and she's in The Guest. And A Watcher is a movie that I underrated the first time, and like it stuck in my head, and I watched it again. I'm like, that movie's really good.
That was good.
She's great. She's just great, and very much looking forward to They Follow, or whatever it's called, this It Follows sequel coming from David Robert Mitchell that Michael Monroe will return for. And Osgood Perkins, I know he's got the Monkey adaptation next, the Stephen King short, over at Neon. An article I read says he also has an unknown other project that's set up at Neon. That's an original work. So I'm just happy the man is working. I think Neon has a record. Well, Neon's definitely going to have a record weekend for Neon, because Neon's movies haven't made a lot of money historically. I think Parasite's probably the biggest. Oh yeah,
Immaculate was the biggest one.
Immaculate
weekend, at least.
Right, exactly. And like even that topped out at like it opened at like 8 or 9 million. Like it wasn't huge. So this is definitely going to be
this is going to be double digits at least. And it's going to be double digits period, but I don't know how high.
Yeah, it seems like the momentum based on like, what do you call it? Anecdotal evidence of like people posting, my theater sold out and they added screens. And that's absolutely true here in New York. It's playing as if it's like a Marvel movie here. It's got several screens at every AMC. They opened up the premium format large screen, the prime screen for it at Times Square. So I think it will overperform, and I'm delighted to hear that. And I will be seeing it again, hopefully tonight. So by the time I talk about it again on the New Flesh podcast, I will have a new perspective on it because I will have seen it a second time in a large format. And, with my issues known going in, will it play better? Stay tuned to the New Flesh podcast for that. But stay tuned here because we're going to talk about 5 more movies, including Fly Me to the Moon, starring Scarlett Johansson, Channing Tatum, and, of course, Jim Rash. Here's the trailer.
Hey, Joe. Eating cold? Miss, you're on fire.
Very original. No, I do not want to stop, drop, and roll with you.
No, your book is on fire.
Oh my God.
Alcohol and flames, they like each other. Cold days.
Kelly Jones.
Public support for the moon mission is rock bottom.
Every day, something is breaking.
And we're dead. Again. Yeah, we're blowing up.
The space program is a bloated mess.
NASA needs a marketing specialist, and you are the very best.
Excuse me? What are you doing here?
I tracked you down because I felt we had a connection.
What?
I'm joking. I work here now.
Finally, a movie about PR, publicity, and marketing at the center of the plot. Very important stuff. This movie is halfway there for me in terms of being like charming and fun and like a throwback screwball romantic comedy set against the backdrop of the moon landing. But like it's trying to do too much. And in that process, it loses what should have made it work, which is like the charm and chemistry between the two leads. Because if you look at the poster of this movie, it's clearly selling you like a romance, right? Like it's like the two of them on the poster. And the movie feels less so like that, even though it's in there. The romantic plot is in there. I just never really bought it. That scene you see in the trailer is the only scene where I found that they actually had chemistry, because the rest of it is doing that annoying thing that I probably called out. I don't know if I was reviewing movies on this podcast when Ticket to Paradise came out with George Clooney and Julia Roberts.
Oh, we definitely
Okay,
reviewed
great.
that one.
Okay,
I
great.
remember that very clearly.
Because they had that thing where it's like these are two very charming people who have chemistry, and the movie just puts them at each other's throats and has them bickering, and that's supposed to be funny in the dynamic. And that's kind of the same thing here, where he's the NASA guy who believes in the mission. She's the marketing maven who's come in to, fix everything and sell them and like lie about stuff. And they clash, of course, but there should be this undercurrent of like sexual chemistry to it. And the movie, like, it's perfunctorily there, but like you never feel it. It's just like they bicker, and she goes, "You want to go to dinner, stud?" And he's like, okay. Like it never sells that stuff enough. And then it ends up pivoting to like really silly shit at the end or towards the end. And I'm just like, what's the focus here? Like, it just feels unfocused. But it is kind of charming. I don't know. It's got movie star power and stuff like that. Please, I'm rambling.
No, you're not rambling. I'm torn on the romance, I think, even more because I really don't think it works. I think Tatum and Johansson are doing really good work individually. They're doing really good character work individually because it is about these two different characters with different aims and different motives for wanting to do the NASA mission, the Apollo mission, and get it out to the public. And I don't even think the actors are convinced by the romance. There doesn't seem to be much going on between them because it almost feels as if they're more interested in their characters and what they want. And that's the way that the movie should look at it too, maybe. Because why does it have to be a romance? Why does it have to be sexual tension, bickering? Why can't it just be Tatum's character wants to get to the moon because he's been with the Apollo program since it started and he's seen people die trying to get to the moon and feels responsible for it and wants that to be, wants those deaths not to be in vain. And Johansson is just, I'm here to sell something because it's a job and it's something that I've been hired to do, and that's what I've done my entire life.
Don Draper, Mad Men opening scene.
Yeah,
like, that's the vibe of her character.
Yeah, and they need to come up with some kind of compromise or negotiation professionally to figure out how is that going to work. And I think when the movie is doing that, it kind of works. It's kind of funny. It's kind of charming. And I think it does have this thing of history because, those Apollo missions didn't last long. I think it was like 5 years after Apollo 11. I think tops it's maybe
Yeah.
even less than that. It's been like more than 50 years since we've been to the moon. And so, like, it was quick. People lost interest because it became so routine, just the idea of going to the moon, and it became so expensive. And so, seeing that debate, like, is it really worth it monetarily, and how do you sell it to people? It's an interesting idea, and I think the third act. I know it's all in the trailers, but it's really not that big of a part of the movie until the third act. But the way that it takes the conspiracy theory and
Yeah.
subverts it to show how ridiculous it would be to do
Yeah.
what people say happened with the moon landing. I think that's a really, really funny
Yeah.
and clever idea that doesn't quite pay off because it is revolving around the stakes of the romance at that point. And so there's
Yeah.
something off about that, even though I really appreciated what the scene is doing and how it's doing it and showing how ridiculous it would be to try to stage the moon landing.
Yeah.
It's something about it kept me at a distance. I really think it is going for bigger ideas about space, about space travel, about space exploration, about human discovery, and about practicality of it and how you do it. I think it's going for those bigger ideas, and to just kind of pigeonhole it into a romance, a very formulaic romance, does the material a great service because it's a fun movie in theory around the romance, but because that romance is the key focus of it by the end, it doesn't work.
Yeah. It's got great Channing Tatum in sweaters. It's got great 60s or whatever, fashion, like for art design, whatever you want to call it. Like it looks the part. Doesn't look like the fake movie that the poster looks like it's, the fake movie. But yeah, it's just kind of dumb and veers off track at so many times. You're like, what is the through line here? And I can't get over the bad chemistry. Like I see a lot of people praising the chemistry between the two of them. I think it's just like two movie stars on screen. They go, chemistry. I love it.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
And it's just not true. Like I'm a huge Channing Tatum fan, and I would say he's miscast here. I think that's part of the problem. And then I read that Chris Pine was cast and dropped out of this at some point, and then he came in, which makes me think about like, what would that movie look like? How different would that be? Would that work a little better? Maybe. I don't know. But I love Channing, and I just thought this movie didn't. I feel like ScarJo comes off like she's a good fun performance for her, but like I don't know. I wouldn't show this to anyone to say like this is Channing Tatum's a great actor. Check out Fly Me to the Moon. Like he's done other stuff that I like better. Yeah, there's some fun stuff with Jim Rash as like the director who's trying to do the fake moon landing. He's like the comic relief in this movie that's already supposed to be a comedy, but isn't really nailing it that much. Yeah, I don't know. It's doing a lot. We've seen so many moon landing movies, and I guess that's why they tried to do it different, like the focus on the romance and not focus on the actual moon stuff because we've seen it so many times. But yeah, that doesn't make it work. But Ray Romano's fun in this. I liked seeing him. And I appreciated that it didn't look as much like a TV movie because it's an Apple production. It didn't look as much like a streaming movie as I expected it to. So there's some positives for you. But, it's just whatever. I'm like 2.5 on this movie.
I'm a little bit lower too. I want to say I think it looks really good because
Yeah,
they put in actual footage like from do you remember the Apollo 11 documentary that came out a few years ago?
yes,
There's some footage from that documentary in here, and all of that blends pretty well. Of
yeah,
the shots of the actual Apollo 11 preparation with the stuff that's going on in the control room and everything. It looks really good. But yeah, it's just so underwhelming just to narrow the focus down to a romance that doesn't really work because I don't think anybody involved really cares about the romance angle of this movie. Yeah, that's really too bad.
yeah. It kind of played flat too for a movie that's supposed to make people laugh. It felt like I think I read someone say it felt like it's so sitcom-y. He was like needed a laugh track to tell people when to laugh. I'm like, yeah, that kind of would have helped the audience I saw it with because they didn't know when to laugh. Yeah, it's okay. I wish I liked it more, but like ScarJo does some some fun stuff to the point where I'm like, I'm having an okay time with this movie, but it just keeps getting in its own way for sure. Let's talk about Touch.
Kristoffer, fólk í þínum sporum, það notar tækifæri til þess að gera hreint fyrir sínum dyrum.
Hæ, pabbi minn.
Já, ég á leiðinni til Lundúna.
Lundúna?
Ég er að leita að gamlum vini sem hvarf.
Sorry.
Christopherさん. And you met my daughter, Miko?
Dad says you want to be a cook.
He told you that.
Who's going to be the judge of that? Do you want me to come?
You can't be too tough on me, though.
I wish I liked this movie. It's perfectly fine and okay. I just think it's too busy with like trying to get at the political upheaval of the 60s and all this other stuff that it's trying to do. And also, I thought it was set at COVID for a very specific reason, and it feels like it never actually uses that in a way that is meaningful. It just kind of sets the plot into motion in a more perfunctory way than it could based on a title and what's going on. I just didn't think it was like, I feel like this book's probably pretty impactful, and this just isn't like a great adaptation of the material. I haven't read the book, but it seemed like the parts were there for this to work, but it didn't make me feel anything, I guess. But I think it worked a little better for you. So tell me about it.
Yeah, it worked for me. It's a romance. It's a very simple, old-fashioned romance about two people who fell in love a long time ago, and then he's trying to reconnect with her. Oh, what is it? I think he says it 51 years
50,
exactly. It's
yeah,
the one
right,
thing he
51.
can specifically remember because it's the most important part of his life. So it's this man in Iceland. He's just been diagnosed, or he's about to get the official diagnosis of having some sort of degenerative brain condition that like AKA or similar to Alzheimer's, something with dementia. He's losing his memory. He's having hard times with motor skills, and the doctor suggests if you have unfinished business, now's the time people usually take care of it. The only unfinished business in his life is finding out what happened to the woman he fell in love with in 1969. And he has no clue what happened to her. And so it's one of those, back and forth stories where you get him searching for her and you see how much has changed in the world and how she's moved around. He has no clue where she's at. And then you have the flashbacks to show the romance developing. I think it just works. I think it's so simple and so straightforward and so sincere about just, this idea that the one thing this guy has on his mind in his later years, and when he has to take care of things, is that this woman that he loved and wants to just find her and find out what happened and what it means. I think it's just a lovely little idea, and I think it's a lovely little movie that works, even though it's not doing anything big. It's not trying to go. I think I know what you mean with the COVID idea and trying to tie it to the past. Maybe does the word quarantine have to do with what you were thinking?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, sure.
maybe.
Yeah,
I don't
there's
know.
just so many.
Okay.
It's doing so many things. It's like ticking clock with COVID, and we also have his condition that we know about. There's just like so many different things, and it's like John Lennon and Yoko Ono gets referenced, which I thought was interesting but a little bizarre. And then there's Hiroshima bombing context. It's just like there's just way too much for me that like, and it was too little of each. Where like I'm just like, this is not really painting a whole picture. It's just giving me weird little snippets where I'm like, yeah, this probably would work as a book, but as a movie, it feels like I just didn't buy it. Like, oh, you're learning haikus at work talking. I just didn't buy the scenes where they're like, let's do a haiku because this is people of our culture do. It just didn't feel lived in a way that I bought. I just didn't buy it, I guess, is the problem. Like, as I'm talking about it, I'm learning that's the problem. This is from Baltazar Kormakar, the director of such American films as Beast with Idris Elba and Everest and Two Guns and Contraband with Mark Wahlberg and Adrift with Shailene Woodley. So it was interesting to see him working in was this Icelandic film? I guess this is what Touch is.
It's a probably an international production. I mean, it's got it's all over the place. I like the fact that it's all over the place. It does have that kind of sweep of a decades-long romance. I think it works. I'm not saying it's a great movie at all.
Yeah.
I just think I think
coming
what
on
it
the
sets out to
heels,
do, it does it well.
Coming on the heels of like a Past Lives or something. It just feels like a a lesser version of something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. That's where I'm at with it. It's not anything bad.
Again, I'm nowhere saying it's close to Past Lives. It's not even, again, like I'm giving it 3 stars. As I always say, 3 stars contains multitudes.
It sure does.
Giving, same rating as Longlegs, which I was praising a lot more and more specifically than this one. It just feels right. It feels right that it's doing what it's doing and how it's doing it. I like the performances. I like that by the end, it's less about his story, and you do get a deeper sense of the woman's story and everything that she went through, and all of that context of Hiroshima and how that functions and how that fits in, and the relationship with the father. It's a lot at the end, a lot like Longlegs too, I guess. It's an exposition dump basically, but it works because you are wondering the entire time what happened to this woman and what was she going through, and just to have that simple connection by the end of talking to each other and figuring it out. It worked. I don't know what else to say. I'm not going to argue too strongly in its favor, but I think it's a good old-fashioned romance that does exactly what it says it's going to do, and does it with confidence, and it looks very nice. All
right. Well, there you go. Touch. I'm 2.5.
Where are you at?
2.5.
Okay, not too bad though.
Yeah, and you're 3.
Yes.
Which contains multitudes, of course.
Contains multitudes.
All right. Let's talk about this is going to be fun. Inheritance from Vertical Entertainment. Here's the trailer.
You're probably wondering why I called you all home.
It's an Abernathy reunion!
Here's Madeline.
CJ. And here's Drewski and Hannah Banana.
Hi, Cameron.
It's been years since we were all under this roof.
So quiet. Where's everyone?
He sent the staff and security home for the night.
Why?
I think it's best he tell you himself.
Dad, we need you to level with us. What's going on?
I asked you all here because by midnight, I'm going to die.
What? Dad, you look fine. What did the doctor say?
I didn't say I was sick.
This whole thing is insane.
You really think your dad's just making all this up?
I don't know what they were going to reveal. I don't know what you want to reveal, but I'm surprised.
I don't know either.
I'm surprised you like this enough to give it a positive review. I don't think it's like terrible or anything, but it just feels like it's doing again another movie that's like post Succession. There's been a lot of like there's been tons of eat the rich movies anyway, especially in horror. Ready or Not maybe started that trend or something like that. But there's been a lot of like rich people come up and stuff. There's a lot of rich people fighting for their father's love and inheritance or whatever. We just saw that one from David Cronenberg's daughter. Caitlin Cronenberg's Humane was pretty similar. Fair. I didn't like that either. This has inspired moments though. Like I guess I get that's why I'm assuming it's like the unexpected horror moments that actually work that made it work for you, because that's what made it almost work for me.
Yes, it did. I really like the premise of the basic premise is that Bob Gunton, the warden from Shawshank, as people probably best know him as, his character, wealthy business tycoon. He's basically the patriarch Roy from Succession, but just in a mansion alone with his kids. And he says that there is a bounty on his head, basically from a bad business deal that happened years ago, and now it's going to be paid off by killing him. And the only people he trusts are his kids. So they lock down the mansion with all the adult children inside to try to protect their father. And then, they debate whether or not he's crazy or whether or not it's legit. And then some more things happen. And I was surprised by it because I wasn't sure where it was going to go. I had no clue that it was going to take that angle. It's probably a good thing I didn't watch the trailer. I'm assuming it's probably revealing too much, the way that another movie that has a really clever setup, but then the marketing ruined the actual twist to it, and I don't even want to say the movie because then it'll give away what's going on here. This is a terrible way to review something. Just vaguely talking about other movies so they could say, but that's what I'm going to do. This is my lane. I have chosen it. It's yeah, I was surprised by it. I think the premise is really neat. I think the performances get the job done. I think it's really well directed for certain scare sequences and what's going on here. There's that scene at the pool that works really well because of where the camera is and the way that it tracks the movement without actually seeing what's happening. That was really creepy. I wasn't expecting that. There's some neat stuff with the mansion, just the mansion alone, all the secret, everything you expect from a mansion and during a murder mystery story. There's a secret passageway. There's long hallways that characters have to walk down or they get dragged down at some point because of what's going on here. I don't know. It's another one of those movies. I'm not going to argue too much in its favor.
Yeah.
But I think it works at doing exactly what it sets out to do, which is just to, give you that little eerie sense that something's wrong and then just go for it when it does reveal what is going on here. So that by the end, I really liked where it went, even though I could kind of see where it was going, even with the multiple twists at the end or the multiple reveals by the end. I don't care. It worked. It's well shot, it's well directed, it's well paced. It's a really short movie. I appreciated that because it doesn't stick around too long to do all these lengthy explanations of what it's trying to do. I don't know. It's a nice little thriller. That's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I think it got by the end, I was definitely in a different place than I was after the first 30 minutes, where I was just like, this is the clunkiest exposition. These performances are amateur. Like, this isn't very good. And by the time its premise is actually going through with itself, and I'm not gonna say the horror stuff that ends up taking over, there's the scene where there's with a mirror that was cool, with actually a painting. I think it was a character coming out of a painting or something. That was, there's cool moments where you're oh, this actually works. And then there's a reveal towards the end of a thing that is you weren't expecting to see, probably is the best way I'll say it. And I thought it was unique looking and cool and scary and unexpected. So when it veers to the unexpected, I liked it, but it just took a long time to get there. And it's a movie I've seen before, this exact layout. I feel like I've seen this exact thing before, and it just didn't do enough. Well, it's close. It's closer than I thought by the beginning. It was like a 1.5 star movie that became a 2-star movie that became a 2.5 star movie by the end for me. So I'm 2.5 on The Inheritance.
Oh,
yeah. I thought about it, and I don't want to reveal what the thing is, but it's so predictably and obvious what it is. Even it's telegraphed, I think, but it's again, the only reason I'm saying it almost works is because it actually cares to make the horror elements not be CGI'd afterthoughts. It's oh, they did this practically. They actually cared about getting this horror element right. And that stuff did go a long way with me, even if I thought the rest of it was whatever.
Okay, cool. I'll take 2.5 because this is a hard sell, I think, for a lot of people who would actually see it, critic wise. But I think it works well. It's 3 stars for me.
3 stars for Mark, 2.5 for me. And now this will probably be the most fun we've ever had on the podcast. Let's talk about Lumina, the craziest movie that's ever gotten a release as wide as this one, probably. I don't know how wide it is, but it's wide enough that we're talking about it. And it shouldn't be. We shouldn't be talking about it. It's cheap. It's made by a clear whack job. We'll talk about it. Here's the trailer, which I'm excited to see also.
In your eyes, I see no fear. I have finally found my love. Distance could never keep us.
That does a good job of selling it. as something that is much more competent than
I had the same thought. That's a pretty good trailer, especially within the context of the movie that they're taking things from.
Yeah. So the best way to describe this movie is it's as if Tommy Wiseau, if you're not familiar with that guy, the guy who wrote and directed The Room, the movie that famously plays at theaters at midnights at cult screenings all the time, all year round, not because it's a good movie, but because someone tried to make a movie genuinely, excuse me, and it turned out to be one of the worst movies of all time. That's what The Room is known as, the worst movie of all time. And unlike a lot of movies that try to be B movies, like a Sharknado, that like the whole joke is it's a bad movie, but they're trying to make a bad movie. The only way I'm trying to say is the only enjoyable version is a bad movie that is intentional, was made with good intentions. One where the guys who making it do not think they're making a bad movie. They think they're making a good movie. And fortunately, this is that kind of bad movie, clearly made by a nut job who thinks this is important and smart and good. And it's just awful. And it's the best piece of, oh, this guy's crazy cinema since Deion Taylor's Fear. By the time you reach the on-screen text at the end of this movie, which is accompanied by what I have to imagine is an original song that is the craziest thing I've ever heard, you will be howling laughing. It is horrible. It is one of the cheapest, stupidest, barely a movie things I've ever seen. But when Mark told me that it was that bad, I, of course, had to watch it so we could talk about it. And I didn't run away from it like I do the normal 2-star movies. This is the 1-star movie or a half-a-star movie, I believe, at RogerEbert.com, actually. Or actually, no, RogerEbert.com gave it the full 0, which is a thumbs down on the website, which rarely happens. So tell me, how did you explain this movie to people, or try to?
Boy, it's an alien abduction thriller about a group of friends. One of them is abducted by an alien, supposedly, in California. And so, logically, they all fly to Morocco to go figure out what happened. I don't even know if they explain why. I think the thing was shot in Morocco. That's why they fly to Morocco. They have Morocco standing in for California, and then they realize that's not going to work. Let's the country where it's at. So it's really mostly a melodrama, and a really, really bad melodrama with characters. The boyfriend says, oh God, the boyfriend saying Tatiana over and over and over and over again. And he's weeping and sobbing and dreaming and
He's the performance that made me write down Tommy Wiseau. Like, his performance is far and above beyond worse. Maybe it's because he's the lead and he has to do it the most, but he's awful. He's terrible.
It's bad, but it's a terrible script when it's just Tatiana over and over again.
And her face appearing in the pool. Do you remember that?
I forget about that. No, you know what? You know why? Because I was too distracted by the beard to signal that it has been a while.
To signal that time had passed. They gave this man a caveman beard. Yeah.
Doctor, you can move his face forward now. That was what I thought.
Yeah, so they have him with a beard, and then there's a woman's, like, imagine you're watching, it's like Teletubby style, like, you know, the baby's face is superimposed on the sun. It looked like that, but it was a lady's face superimposed on a pool for a second to indicate that he's still thinking about her after she was abducted by aliens, I guess, in the weirdest CGI you've ever seen. Like the laziest, like doesn't even look like they half finished it.
Okay,
CGI.
The problem with that, doesn't it look like she gets vaporized?
Yes.
It looks like there's a pool of red at the ground. I thought she was dead. I really thought that she had been straight up murdered by the aliens. And then the cops, who all have Eastern European accents in California, all the cops show up. Well, I guess there's nothing we could do. Your girlfriend just disappeared by a beam of light. Oh, well. It's so... These characters are.
You're
so
right, though.
dumb.
I spent a long time thinking that she was dead, and the movie's plot kicked in. Like, wait, they're looking for her? She died. What do you mean?
What was that pool of blood at the base of the beam of light where she disappeared? Or, you know, I thought, you know, just disintegrated from, but nope, she's alive. Oh man, I don't know what's more incompetent about this. The melodrama. The attempts at comedy, just having a character enter just to be comic relief, clearly, to have another character say, that's pretty funny, after one of his jokes just to make sure you knew it was a joke and you're supposed to laugh at it, or all of the science fiction stuff, which I will give the movie some credit. I think, and this is a little bit of credit, I think all of the background stuff and some of the visual effects in the third act kind of work. I
Yeah,
think
it
looks kind of good.
My comparison is there's like this low budget sci-fi franchise that I think is entirely direct to video. Maybe the first one was in theaters. Skyline is the comparison that I would do, where it's like those movies for some reason have a following. They're definitely low budget, but they have like low budget special effects that are impressive for the budget. And like for moments, this movie does seem to have special effects that are like above their pay grade or something. But it's one of those
they
things.
don't. There are definitely shots where you
yeah.
can tell, like,
Well, they
no,
don't.
this didn't work. But
it's one of those things where, like, if your friend made this movie, and like showed it to you at their house, like, yeah, I spent a couple years shooting and making a movie. Here it is. You would probably go like, good job. Like, that was impressive. I didn't know you could do special effects like that on a budget. But this is a movie. This isn't something a friend made in their yard. Like, it's crazy that it looks like that, generally speaking. And the inclusion of Eric Roberts is hilarious because I think he's top billed. It looks like he's the star of this movie. I was expecting him to be the star of this movie based on like the IMDb listing, and he's in it for like 3 minutes. But he does make an impression, and it's kind of funny. But it's just like a movie where people are walking through on a quest and they just end up meeting a bunch of kooky characters along the way. They meet the girl's mom, the parents who they're looking for, and the parents reveal that like, oh yeah, she was actually super into alien abduction stuff and was looking into it, by the way. Something that like would have been nice to know early on when the movie just starts and it's like, we're at a party, this is awesome, and then the aliens come and take her away. It is just borderline parody, and it's hard to tell if it's going for intentional Sharknado, let's laugh at the B-movie vibes, but it mostly feels Tommy Wiseau-esque in that it feels like they were earnestly trying to make this into something, and they're just inept in every way, right?
It's hard to tell with the ending, for example. You brought up the statistics. I have questions about those statistics, by the way, at the end.
Yeah.
In the text. But to follow up that with a gag about alien abduction at the very, very end kind of makes me wonder, maybe this is sort of a joke. Kind of like Birdemic. The Birdemic movies are one of those. I can't tell if they're intentionally making a bad movie or if they've just made a bad movie. It's hard to tell with Birdemic. This is one of those too, where it's going to be questioned and examined and riff traxed probably by a few people to try to uncover the mystery of whether or not this is a sincere movie that turned out really, really bad, or an intentionally bad movie that just feels like it's flailing because it's not bad enough to get you in on the joke.
When it ends with that earnest, it's just like it ends with an earnest rumination on alien abduction statistics. Like, this many people are abducted in the U.S. every year. It goes unreported due to public ridicule. Like, it is. That's when I'm like,
I wonder where you get that from.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, this guy's nuts. Like, we just watched the product of a crazy person, and that's when I knew. I mean, there's many times throughout the movie that you can figure out that it's made by a crazy person, but that's where he signed it and put his name on it.
But again, if that little text was followed up by a joke.
It's a good point.
So again, I don't know. That feels like the wrong way to go if you're very sincere about your alien abduction statistics.
The most entertaining about this movie, weirdly, is the Wikipedia page that is also very clearly authored by this nut job who wrote this movie and produced it and directed it. And just for a taste of how it starts, here's the production part is what I'm talking about. It's only a few paragraphs, but it's terrific. But it starts with, the process of bringing the film Lumina to life involves significant challenges. After numerous agencies were unable to commit to a director, the film's screenwriter decided to direct the film himself. Together with his mother, Linda, that's all. I'm just going to leave it there. That's all you need to know. It's self-financed by a guy and his mom. They broke COVID pandemic protocols while making it, and thus lost. SAG-AFTRA instructed its members not to work on the movie because it failed to comply with COVID safety standards, making it one of the few movies to proceed without union support at the time. Like, it has insane Wikipedia page that involves like espionage and the mom saying money was stolen from them, and it's just nut job stuff. It's just crazy. It's crazy that this movie's coming out at all. I don't know how it ended up in theaters, but here we
Significant
are.
number of theaters too. It's not just like
So
this is out around you.
It
if
is
you
one of
feel-
those. Yeah,
If you feel inclined to laugh along with a movie or laugh at a movie, I don't know which one it is yet. Again, it's just a bad movie. Whether or not you're supposed to laugh at it or not, we'll figure out later.
Yeah.
But if you feel like that, if you feel like, taking your favorite ingestive, and enjoying a movie, go for it. Might be worth it. It's a terrible movie though. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, it's very bad, but it's one of those very terrible movies where I'm like, yeah, if you have AMC A-list and this is playing at your AMC and you're bored and you want to see a dumb movie with your friends, you will be entertained, I think. But it's horrible. 1 star feels too much, but I'll give it 1 star.
Yeah, I'm 1 star for me too, and that's mainly I don't even know. Like I said, I don't think it's completely incompetent. It's pretty incompetent at times, but I have definitely seen worse movies, which is nuts to say. Oh, what have I done with my life?
I love it.
I have seen worse movies than Lumina.
That is
Ooh,
impressive.
okay.
That is impressive.
1 star.
That is the bar. Really crazy stuff. Had a good time talking about it and watching it and reading that Wikipedia page though. All right, let's end on a fun note by talking about Louis C.K. and the documentary Sorry Not Sorry.
Comparisons to Lenny Bruce, comparisons to Bob Dylan, comparisons to being a sort of philosopher king. Jesus.
When I said I wanted to work with Louis C.K., I should have been more specific as opposed to like how it all panned out.
These stories have been around for a while, and everybody kind of casually knows, really. This jerking off comedian is obviously just Louis C.K.
He basically said something along the lines of, what? Like, I like to jerk off in front of people.
He was talking about what turns them on.
Most female comedians quit because it's just a series of indignities that they have to suffer their entire life.
Because you've been socialized in this world where men get to treat women however they want.
I know a lot about Louis C.K. and comedy, and I think as someone who's into comedy, did this movie teach me anything? Did I learn anything new? Like, I don't think so, but I think it's a really solid documentary that just is focused on a single issue. It talks about it as much as it can. It's like a narrative that's not quite finished yet. It's still ongoing, but it does a really good job of summarizing what happened with Louis C.K., what happened in his career briefly, and how he came back. And it really hasn't affected. I mean, it did change things, but it didn't change things. He's still selling out theaters and arenas, but it's on his own terms now. And he doesn't have his TV shows. He lost $30 million because of FX and all the people bailing on him. But this is a documentary about not just Louis C.K., but the Me Too movement and that time and men being accountable, and is cancellation real? It's tackling a lot of big stuff, and it does it deftly enough for me. I thought it was totally engaging and fine. I'm curious what you thought about it.
Yeah, I liked it. I think it does get at the case it gets at the case in a very diplomatic way. Just it's telling both sides of it in a way, but I do appreciate the fact that it's as skeptical of CK as it needs to be, because there's a lot of stuff that comeback stuff is really suspicious, because he has never officially apologized for his behavior. He's talked around an apology.
He's acknowledged it as real and then moved on, essentially.
And that's it. Yeah, he's just said, yeah, this all happened, and it's time to learn some things from it. It's time to figure out who I am and all that. But never actually saying sorry to the women that, in a couple of cases, it was non-consensual sexual behavior with women that, I mean, that's not good, to say the least. Right. It's very strange by the end, because I knew that CK had come back and I knew he was doing his stuff on his website and through his company.
But you
and all
didn't
that
know he
stuff.
sold out MSG.
I
and
didn't
stuff
know.
Like that? Yeah.
I had no clue about that. I had no clue that there were people who were just completely on board with him after that and who go along with. It's so weird to see the comedy footage stuff after the comeback where he's suddenly shifted from it was something bad that I did and I need to get over to saying that it's a fetish. That's a completely different context for that kind of behavior. When you say it's a fetish, that implies that it's something that is happening consensually between you and someone else, and that
Right.
is agreed
You
upon,
can't
as
have like
opposed to
yeah, you can't have like a rape fetish because that's non-consensual.
yeah,
You know
that's
what
not
I mean?
yeah, exactly. There's stuff,
Right.
and what I always looked at with CK because I really did like his comedy, and
Oh, he's one of the greatest stand-ups. He's terrific. Yeah.
during that time it was.
Yeah.
But what shifted it for me is that I think that when you have a comedian who is doing that sort of tasteless jokes, or the stuff, there's an agreement. There's a tacit agreement that I can make this joke because deep down I am a decent person who realizes that is a bad thing to talk about, that it's something that is wrong, that it's something that I need to get over, and I'm going to explore it through comedy. It's an agreement. And so for me, as soon as that stuff came out and he said, "Yeah, this happened," I'm like, "Well, you just broke my trust with you. I trusted you not to be that kind of guy that you're making fun of or that you're trying to get around. You are actually that guy." And so it was very easy for me to just say, I'm not paying attention to Louis C.K. anymore unless somehow he gets a movie in wide release, at which point, I'll do my usual thing of trying to separate the art from the artist. But as a comedian, in my downtime of what I watch, he was out of the picture for that stuff. That was really easy for me to do. And it's so confusing just to have people still be like, yeah, but you know what? It's fine. I still think he's funny. I don't care about that stuff. Like, you should care about that stuff. You should at least think about it for a little bit. I'm so confused by the people who are still like very open fans who don't.
Yeah, well, some
see
people
past-
revel in it. They rub it in your face. That like, well, Louis C.K. when he came out at MSG, I think he said, "Thank you guys for supporting me. All of you have at least one person that doesn't know you're here," and like that's also true. Like the people who go, like some of them are, happy to be interviewed and be like, "Yeah, fuck it, Louis C.K. I'm happy to support him." Other people are, I think, fans and just don't want the attention and are, as he said, they didn't tell anyone that they were there. But that speaks to like the moral issue that people have.
Yeah.
It's an age-old question. Artists, support the art, not the artist, kind of thing. Like, can you like someone who's problematic? It gets at these questions. I don't think it answers them, but it doesn't have to. It's just
it doesn't.
Yeah.
But it is examining them and in a nice way that is not just, it's not coming out and saying like don't support Louis C.K. if you are, but it is saying like maybe you should ask why you are. Why, after you know all of this stuff, why are you still supporting him when he hasn't? There's no accountability. There isn't. Yeah, you can say he lost $30 million in one day, but you know what? That he had $30 million to lose.
Right.
That's another thing to think about. It's not as if he paid $30 million to the women, as far as I know.
Society, I was gonna say, I think society would be a little less kind to him had "I Love You, Daddy" been released, because I've seen it and I've
seen it too.
It's yikes. It is like the movie, as this documentary talks about, like it's essentially is it more? I don't even know if you say it's a confession, but it is sort of confessional. But it's also kind of just like rubbing it in faces, kind of thing. Where like, this is what I do, and I'm going to do it. And the whole movie is making an argument about artists and art and problematic artists and stuff like that. So it's crazy that he made that right before, as the movie makes clear, this stuff was bubbling up online. He knew about it, certainly. So he made that at the height of it was about to come out. And that, like, the hubris of that, or maybe it was him trying to say it and it was his way of getting it out. I don't know. But it's all gross and weird. And that's undeniable. Yeah, I don't know. I was once a big fan. I'm the kind of person where, like, for the cultural conversation and because I watch everything, like, I have watched his new stuff post that, I don't, and I did find some of it funny, but I found some of it offensive. Like, it's one of those things. I think someone in the documentary says this, where it's like, he had such an opportunity. He came so close to like doing the right thing, of being like, taking accountability. Yes, he did. He said, I did it. But he didn't do the second part of like, say you're sorry and like actually just like meaningfully engage with it rather than turn it into like a punchline and call your special sorry and put sorry and lights behind you and just make it a joke. He didn't really actually engage with it. And that is what it is. But the documentary, totally fair, totally solid, 3-star documentary. That's a good summation of this if you know nothing about it or if you know everything about it.
Yeah, it's worthwhile because it has interviews with across the board, which is worthwhile. So yeah, 3 stars for me too. And I mean, I knew the basics of what had happened, but again, like I said, I had no clue about except for hearing that he was still around and doing specials and all of that stuff. You know, like I didn't know what was going on there. So it's worthwhile seeing what the consequences or non-consequences of that behavior have been because people are just saying it's fine, whatever. It's like that's concerning. That you know, I'm not even saying he can't do comedy anymore. It's just
well,
do more than say you did it and then change your story after the
he
fact.
Could have made he could have
so
pivoted. He, you know, people would be applauding this man if he like wrote a book and just like engage with it in any sort of meaningful way, talk to the victims and apologized and made it a part of the act that he like, I don't know. There's a way to do it. And he very like pointedly did not do the thing that would have made a lot of people, I think, appreciate him. And he could have been like a model for how to respond to these type of allegations. And instead it just like was another guy who leaned into like, my life sucks now, but I'll lean into my fans because I have a cult fan base, and that's enough for me. And I appreciated the breadth of talking heads, as you said. They include like Mike Shore, I believe, like the guy who created Parks and Recreation, who like admits his culpability. Essentially, he's like, yeah, like I cast him even though I had heard this because I was like, this isn't my problem to solve. The industry clearly doesn't care, and like I'm not going to care. And then he basically wants to. He's in there and he feels bad about it, but I think some people would see that and get mad that that's included. I think that's nice.
No, I think I think that's really good to say. Like, I'm part of the problem is not paying attention, and part of the problem is not, believing stories and trying to and talking around it in your head. Like, how does it? You justifying the fact that like, oh, he's the most famous comedian in the world. It'll help the show. That stuff's really interesting, and the people who haven't wrestled with it, like, I don't want to. There's some people here who clearly are like, I have a line and he didn't cross it.
Right.
Like,
yes.
oh, okay.
Well, yeah,
All
the owner of the Comedy Cellar, famously.
Yeah, I didn't want to say a name.
Getting a lot of shit at the time, and I appreciate that he at least appeared at the
He's there. Yeah, he's there. He makes his case.
He makes his case. He's there.
He makes his case. You can hear it and you can judge for yourself. And this documentary lets you hear all the sides of it and lets you judge for yourself. And that makes it worthwhile, I think.
There's like an uncomfortable, ironic thing about the Comedy Cellar specifically, because the Comedy Cellar is a place where the whole thing is a celebrity might drop in, and that's why you're there. You're hoping that happens. But Louis C.K. makes like the whole thing about Louis C.K. is consent and consensual. So when you're putting him upon audiences without consent, I understand why people have a problem with that. But at the same time, as a fan of stand-up, like the pop-ins are going to happen. And people probably probably 75% of the room is happy to see him. So like, should we be? It is an interesting question, and I don't know. That's why there's documentaries about it. It's a tough topic. 3 stars, solid documentary. Solid, not sorry, or sorry, not sorry about Louis C.K. And his transgressions. 3 stars from both of us. Is that right?
Yes. Yep.
All right. Okay, that was it. That's the podcast. We'll be back next week with. God, is there? Oh, the big release next week is Twisters, the sequel to the 1996, I imagine, box office hit because it has a long tail. It's a phenomenon. It led to a Twisters the Ride at Universal, which features an incredible Paxton performance at the ride itself, in addition to the film. It's funny. Twisters has always been like a 2.5-star movie, or Twister. So I hope that the new one is able to elevate it with, fun cast and the guy who made Minari directing it, all these fun things. I hope it's a fun summer blockbuster. The bar is low, is my point, because Twister is not that great. I hope that doesn't piss anybody off. People who love spinning CGI cows are really mad at me right now. All right, bye.
The show starts in 1...
Jordan-san, shut up. Ush.